I never believed in haunted schools. Ghost stories were something we told each other at sleepovers or around bonfires, a way to scare the younger kids into behaving. But the night I agreed to stay behind in my old high school, I learned that some stories weren't just tales, they were warnings. The school had always carried a strange reputation. Even when I was a student there, whispers floated through the halls about the basement no one used anymore, or the fourth-floor storage rooms that had been permanently locked after a fire years ago. Teachers avoided talking about it, and when students asked too many questions, they were met with silence or a quick change of subject. But everyone in town knew that our high school had secrets. My connection to the building wasn't just as a former student. After graduating and struggling to find steady work, I landed a temporary night security job there. The pay wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. All I had to do was walk the halls from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., make sure no one had broken in, and log any strange activity in the dusty old record book the school kept in the main office. I figured it would be easy money. A quiet building, no students, no teachers, just me. The flicker of fluorescent lights and silence. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd walk the same routes, check the doors, and sit in the office scrolling through my phone until the shift was over. But on the fourth night, things changed. It started with a sound. A faint tapping, like chalk against a blackboard, echoing down the math wing. At first, I brushed it off as old pipes or the building settling. It was a century-old school, after all. But when I turned down the hall, I froze. At the far end of the corridor, lit only by a dim emergency light, I saw it. A blackboard. Not unusual, except for the fact that words were being written on it. Slowly, deliberately, a line of chalk scratched against the board, spelling out something I couldn't fully make out from where I stood. My throat went dry. I was alone. No one else should have been in that building, especially not in that locked wing. But there it was, white letters appearing out of nowhere. I forced myself closer, each step echoing loudly in the silence. The board came into clearer view, and my stomach dropped when I read the words, "You shouldn't be here." The chalk dropped to the floor with a soft clatter, though no one had been holding it. I didn't run. I should have, but part of me couldn't believe what I was seeing. I lifted my flashlight and swept the room. Desks were scattered as if left in a hurry years ago, old test papers yellowing with age. But the board was the only thing out of place. That was the first sign. The second came a few hours later, around midnight. I was making my way past the gym when I heard the sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished wooden floor, the kind of sound every student knew from basketball practice. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone dribbling a ball. I hesitated by the double doors, hand resting on the handle. Maybe one of the coaches had left equipment behind? Maybe some kid had found a way in? I pushed the doors open, and the sound stopped instantly. The gym was empty. The floor gleamed under the cold glow of the overhead lights, but no basketball, no players, no movement. I stepped inside, feeling the chill in the air deepen. My footsteps echoed, but nothing else. Then the scoreboard on the far wall lit up. The numbers flickered wildly before settling at 12:0. Midnight. I backed away, heart pounding, and as I reached the door, I swore I heard laughter. A child's laughter, faint but unmistakable, drifting down from the bleachers. I didn't sleep that morning when I got home. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to convince myself it was stress or exhaustion, but the following nights only made it worse. By the end of the week, I began to see them. Figures, shadows moving just beyond the edge of the light. A tall man standing at the end of a hallway who vanished when I blinked. A girl in a school uniform, sitting cross-legged in the library. Her hair covering her face, disappearing as soon as I stepped closer. The worst was in the basement. I hadn't even known the school had one until I found the heavy steel door behind the cafeteria. It was supposed to stay locked, but one night, I found it slightly ajar. The air that seeped through was icy, as though the earth itself was exhaling. Against my better judgment, I went down. The stairs creaked under my weight, and the beam of my flashlight barely cut through the darkness. The basement smelled of damp concrete and something metallic like rust or old blood. At the bottom, I found rows of old desks stacked against the walls, filing cabinets rusting in corners, and a single light bulb hanging from a frayed cord. It swayed gently, though there was no breeze. And in the center of the room was a desk, a single wooden desk, unlike the others, with a carved name on it. I stepped closer, squinting at the faded letters scratched deep into the surface. My heart froze when I read them. It was my name. I staggered back, nearly tripping over an old chair. My name, carved into wood, that must have been decades old, long before I had even been born. That night was the first time I considered quitting the job. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe stubbornness, wouldn't let me walk away. I needed answers. And that's when I started digging into the history of the school. I couldn't shake the sight of my name carved into that desk. All day, I kept running it over in my head like a broken record. How could it have been there, buried in a basement full of abandoned furniture, long before I had even set foot in this world? Was it some kind of coincidence, or was it a message? By the time I returned to the school for my next shift, exhaustion had gnawed at me, but adrenaline kept me sharp. I brought coffee, a flashlight with fresh batteries, and, for reasons I couldn't explain, a notebook. Something told me I needed to start documenting what I was seeing. The halls were quieter than usual that night, like the building itself was holding its breath. My footsteps sounded too loud, echoing in a way that made me feel like I wasn't alone. I started my rounds in the science wing, but before I could even finish, I noticed the faint sound of scratching again. This time, it wasn't chalk on a board, it was paper. I followed it into one of the empty classrooms. At a desk in the front row, a piece of loose-leaf paper sat on top. The scratching sound stopped the moment I entered, but when I lifted the sheet, I saw words written across it in jagged, uneven handwriting. "Help us." I felt a chill run down my spine. The letters looked rushed, desperate, as though whoever wrote them had done so in panic. But the part that made my skin crawl was the fact that the pen still lay on the desk, its tip smeared with fresh ink. I picked it up carefully, but it was ice cold. From that point on, the activity escalated. At midnight, when I passed the main office, the intercom crackled to life. I froze in the hallway, staring at the speaker above the door as static filled the silence. Then, through the distortion, a voice whispered, "Room 304. My skin prickled. I knew that room. It was the old music classroom, unused since the fire years ago. The door was supposed to be permanently locked. Still, I couldn't ignore it. Against every instinct, I made my way to the third floor. The hallway was darker than the others, as if the lights here had dimmed on purpose. When I reached 304, I saw that the lock had been broken. The door stood slightly open, and faintly, I heard the sound of a piano. Not a recording, not a trick. Someone or something was playing. I pushed the door open, and the music stopped instantly. The room was wrecked, half burned from the fire years ago. Charred walls, broken instruments, and in the corner, an upright piano with half its keys melted from heat. Dust blanketed everything, yet I swore the air still smelled faintly of smoke. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling in my hand. That's when I noticed something carved into the piano's surface. Deep grooves, letters scratched violently into the wood. "They won't let us leave." My hand shook. I scribbled the words into my notebook, the sound of my pen deafening in the silence. That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, I decided I needed real answers. I went to the town library, digging through old newspapers, school records, anything I could find. At first, it was the usual small-town nonsense: sports victories, budget cuts, PTA meetings. But then I found the article. It was dated nearly 50 years ago. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes local high school. Students missing after fire." My heart pounded as I read. The article explained that a fire had broken out late one night in the old music wing. Teachers claimed the area was empty, but when the flames were finally put out, several students were unaccounted for. The exact number varied between reports 5, 6, sometimes even 7. Their names were never officially released, but whispers in the community suggested something strange. Witnesses claimed to have seen children at the windows, pounding to get out, but when rescuers broke through, the rooms were empty. And then I saw something that made my stomach twist. In a grainy black and white photo of the aftermath, the charred remains of room 304 stood in the background. And there, barely visible in the shadows of the broken window, was a figure, a boy, staring straight into the camera. The caption made no mention of him. That night, when I returned to the school, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder constantly. The knowledge that something terrible had happened there changed everything. The halls no longer felt like a place of learning. They were a mausoleum, a cage. Around 1 a.m., while walking past the library, I heard it again. Children's laughter. I forced myself inside. The shelves loomed tall and dark, the smell of old books thick in the air. And then, between the stacks, I saw them. Children, 5 of them, standing in the aisle. Their uniforms were scorched, skin pale, eyes dark and hollow. They stared at me, unblinking, not moving. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Then, in perfect unison, they raised their arms and pointed toward the basement. The air grew so cold I could see my breath. My flashlight flickered and died. When I managed to turn it back on, the children were gone, but I knew where I had to go. I descended the basement stairs once again, each step heavier than the last. The old light bulb swung violently this time, as if disturbed by an unseen force. And on the desk, with my name carved into it, another word had appeared beneath. Return. I reached out, my hand trembling, and traced the letters. The moment I did, the temperature dropped, and I heard footsteps all around me. Dozens of footsteps, circling, closer and closer. Whispers filled the room, some too soft to understand, others loud and clear. They trapped us. We can't leave. You're one of us. I stumbled back, flashlight darting wildly around the basement. Shadows twisted against the walls, forming shapes, faces, arms reaching out. And then I saw her, a girl standing in the far corner, the same girl I had glimpsed in the library before, her hair covering her face. This time she stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through me like a knife. They wrote your name before you were born. You were always meant to come back. And before I could respond, every shadow surged forward, swallowing the light. That was the last thing I remembered before waking up on the basement floor, my notebook beside me. On its pages, in handwriting that wasn't mine, a single sentence had been scrawled over and over. Finish what we started. I should have quit right then. After waking in the basement with those words scrawled across my notebook, I should have walked out and never looked back. But there was a pull I couldn't shake. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something that felt like destiny. All day, my body trembled with exhaustion, but my mind raced with questions. Who were those children? What did they mean when they said I was meant to come back? And what was it I was supposed to finish? That night, I returned with a single plan. Face whatever was down there once and for all. No running, no hiding. The halls were wrong from the moment I stepped inside. The air was heavy, oppressive, like I had stepped underwater. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness, and every shadow seemed to bend toward me. I made my way to the basement, but this time the door was wide open, as though something had been expecting me. The old desk still sat in the center, but now every inch of its surface was covered in carvings. Names, dozens of them, some scratched deep, some faint, as though done in haste. I stepped closer and froze, because among them, I saw mine again. This time, Not just my first name, my full name, my handwriting. My knees nearly gave out. I hadn't done this. I knew I hadn't. Yet there it was, as if mocking me. The whispers began again, circling me like a storm. Finish it, they urged. Finish what we started. The shadows thickened, and suddenly I was no longer in the basement. I was standing in room 304, but it wasn't charred anymore. It was alive, burning. Flames licked the walls, smoke filled my lungs, and screams echoed all around. Desks toppled, glass shattered, and children clawed at the windows that refused to open. Their faces pressed against the panes, eyes wide with terror. And then I saw her, the girl with the long hair, standing in the center of the room. The flames bent away from her, as though she commanded them. She turned to me, finally lifting her face, and my heart nearly stopped. She looked like me. Not exactly, her features were softer, her hair longer, but there was no denying the resemblance. She could have been my sister, my cousin, or something closer. You left us, she said, her voice breaking under the weight of grief and rage. They saved you but left us to burn. I shook my head, coughing against the smoke. I wasn't even here. I wasn't born. Her eyes locked onto mine, dark and endless. Not you, him. The flames parted, and suddenly I saw a man in the corner. My grandfather, younger but unmistakable. He wore the same janitor's uniform I wore now, his face twisted with horror. He was pounding on the door, trying to open it, but when the children screamed for help, he turned and ran. He abandoned us, the girl hissed, and his bloodline is cursed to finish what he left undone. My chest tightened. It made no sense, and yet it explained everything: the desk, the names, the reason I felt like I belonged here. The fire raged higher, and the children's screams grew unbearable. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The girl stepped closer, her face inches from mine, her skin cracked like burning paper, her voice layered with dozens of others. "Set us free," the vision snapped. I was back in the basement, gasping for air, the smell of smoke still in my nose. The desk shook violently, dust raining down from the ceiling. My notebook flipped open on its own, pages fluttering until it landed on a blank one. And then, the pen moved. Not by my hand. It wrote, "Burn it down." I stumbled back, heart hammering. They wanted me to torch the school, to finish the fire that had claimed them decades ago. That was the only way to release them. But could I do that? Destroy an entire building? Risk lives? Just to appease the dead? The whispers grew louder, angrier. "Burn it. Burn it. Burn it." I grabbed my notebook and fled, their voices chasing me through the halls. Doors slammed shut on their own. Lockers banged open and shut like jaws. I barely made it outside, gasping for air under the night sky. For 2 days, I didn't go back. I called in sick, locked myself in my apartment, tried to convince myself it had been hallucination, stress, lack of sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames. I heard the screams. I saw her. My face, staring back at me. And then the dreams started. Every night, I was back in room 304. The fire always burned. The children always screamed, and the girl always whispered the same words, "Finish it." I woke drenched in sweat, the smell of smoke lingering in my sheets. On the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I returned to the school, notebook in hand, heart heavy with dread. The building seemed to welcome me this time, its doors swinging open on their own. Lights flickered in the halls, guiding me toward the basement. And when I stepped inside, the children were waiting. All of them. Dozens now. Their faces pale, eyes hollow, uniforms scorched. They surrounded me in silence, their presence crushing, suffocating. The girl stepped forward. "You know what you have to do." I gripped the notebook so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind screamed to run, to fight, but my body moved on its own. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the lighter I'd carried for years but never used. The children watched, unblinking, as I flicked it open. The flame sputtered to life. For a moment, I hesitated. But then, behind them, I saw him again, my grandfather. His face twisted in shame, eyes pleading with me. He mouthed the words I didn't want to hear. "I'm sorry." And then, everything clicked. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about destruction. It was about acknowledgement. They didn't want me to burn the school. They wanted the truth brought to light. The fire had been covered up, their deaths erased, their names forgotten. My grandfather had tried to hide it, and I had inherited his guilt. I snapped the lighter shut. "No," I said firmly. "I won't bury you again. I'll tell your story. I'll make sure no one forgets." The children didn't move. The silence stretched until I thought I'd suffocate. Then, slowly, their faces softened. The girl tilted her head, her eyes finally showing something other than rage. Relief. One by one, they began to fade, their forms dissolving into smoke, their whispers turning into a single word, spoken in unison. Free. The basement grew still. The air warmed. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly alone. When I opened my notebook again, the final page had been filled, not by my hand, by theirs. It was a list of names, every child who had been lost in that fire. The next day, I went to the library again. I showed the list to the archivist, cross-checking against old records, police reports, anything I could find. And for the first time in 50 years, the missing finally had names. I don't work at the school anymore. I couldn't. But sometimes, late at night, I drive past it. And when I do, I swear I see them in the windows, not screaming anymore, not begging, just watching. And sometimes, I see her, the girl who looked like me. She doesn't cry anymore. She just nods, as if to say thank you. But even now, I wonder, did I truly set them free? Or did I just open the door for something